Should I apply EQ before or after compression? Why not both? And for me, look, I have an EQ here. I have an EQ before the compressor, then run into the compressor. I have an EQ after. I have EQ on both sides, and the EQ that I have here is in mid side. Then I run into stereo EQ, then I hit compression, then I hit my mid side EQ after compression. So if you had one EQ, and that's kind of what this question was directed at. I've got one EQ, I've got one compressor. Where do I put the EQ in relation to the compression? If that is the case, put it before, right? EQ, then compression. And the reason for that is that, well, you know, you create your sound, EQ your sound, get your sound right, and then apply your compression. Push into the compressor, utilize the compression with the EQ, push into the compressor, compress. That's a great way to work. However, if you were the other way around, where you've got EQ after compression, then what you're doing is you've got the compression, you set the compression, and then you're pulling it out. So you're kind of countering what you've already done in the compression. So if you're compressing sound, you're compressing it down, then you're bringing stuff out, which is perfectly fine, but I would advise having it before. I mean, in an ideal world, before and after. I mean, I use the Golly portal grinder, you can see there. I use that after the compression. The reason being is I wouldn't necessarily use the PQ, for instance, which is here. I wouldn't necessarily use that after compression because it's not as subtle an EQ. The portal grinder is a very subtle EQ, very good at enhancing. It's often known as like the secret kind of source of EQ with many people, and I will totally agree with that. It is a secret EQ that's really something special. So I personally go before. I have EQ, two EQs before the compressor. I have one in mid side, one in stereo, and then I have one after, which has the ability to be either stereo or mid-side. Granted, 99% of the time, I stick it in mid-side. I keep it in mid-side. So yeah, if you've got the ability to have EQ before and after, I would recommend having both EQ before and after. If you've only got the ability to have one before or after, stick the EQ first, then run into the compressor. Now, one thing to bear in mind here is what you can always do in mastering is before you come out the box, add an EQ. So that way what you could do is you could have digital EQ, utilize digital EQ, then come out the box into the compressor, then have an EQ afterwards. So that way you get that EQ before and after, but you then still, you know, you have the EQ in the box before, into the compressor, then you have your analog EQ after. So you've got options there. I mean, obviously you can come back into the box and then process again in the box. It's based on what you're putting after that that compressor. If you've got a limiter, for instance, you're not necessarily going to want to go EQ in the box, compression, EQ, then go EQ compressor, then go into the limiter and then apply your EQ in the box. So if you think of it as you ideally would want to go EQ compressor, EQ limiting. So yeah, I mean, that would be, look, if I'm in a luxury position where I've got multiple EQs, I can put them and stage them wherever I want. I like to go EQ, compressor, EQ, just because I like to have the ability to do what I want to do, driving it into the compressor, setting my sound, compressing that sound. Then I have a very subtle EQ that then lifts and enhances certain aspects of the compressed sound.